Go ahead, Mr. Hart.
Thank you. I'd like to read into the record a excerpt from I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Before I do this, I'd like to give a few seconds for parents who would wish to maybe move young children or, depending on your sensibilities, to do so. Because of a need for stability, children easily become creatures of habit. After the third time in Mother's bed, I thought there was nothing strange about sleeping there. One morning, she got out of bed for an early errand, and I fell asleep again. But I awoke to a pressure, a strange feeling on my left leg. It was too soft to be a hand, and it wasn't the touch of clothes. Whatever it was, I hadn't encountered the sensation in all the years of sleeping with Mama. I didn't move, and I was too startled to. I turned my head a little to the left to see if Mr. Freeman was awake and gone, but his eyes were open, and both hands were above the cover. I knew, as if I had always known, it was his thing on my leg. He said, "Stay right there, Righty. I ain't going to hurt you." I wasn't afraid, a little apprehensive maybe, but not afraid. Of course, I knew that lots of people did it, and they used their things to accomplish the deed, but no one I knew had ever done it to anybody. Had never done it to anybody. Mr. Freeman pulled me to him and put his hands between my legs. He didn't hurt, but Mama had drilled into my head, "Keep your legs closed and don't let nobody see your pocketbook." "Now, I didn't hurt you. Don't get scared." He threw back the blankets and his thing stood up like a brown ear of corn. He took my hand and said, "Feel it." It was mushy and squirmy like the inside of a freshly killed chicken. Then he dragged me on top of his chest with his left arm, and his right hand was moving so fast and his heart was beating so hard that I was afraid he would die. Ghost stories revealed how people died who died wouldn't let go of whatever they were holding. I wondered if Mr. Freeman died holding me now, I would ever get free. Would they have to break his arms to get me loose? Finally, he was quiet, and then came the nice part. He held me so softly that I wished he would never let go. And it goes on to the more tragic circumstances of the abuse. So, I want to make clear, for the record, that this book, according to what I've seen, is according to, I think it was Huffington Post and a couple other articles. This is one of the most banned books, and I mean banned, removed books in the country, and precisely for this content. This book, in the hands of minors. Is that appropriate? This is a question of propriety. This is a question of what happens when you do get one child feeling trapped, having to read this, discuss this, and not wanting. This whole thing had nothing to do with The Great Gatsby, Catch-22. I read The Great Gatsby. I had no problems with it personally. Catch-22, my daughter read it. She said it was a miserable book, but she got through it. But when you talk about sexual content, and Invisible Man has, while not so graphic, also has a similar abuse scene. It really does come down to propriety. So I wanted to read that for the record so people could know what we're talking about, and specifically what we're talking about. It has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with any of that. I had brought up in an earlier meeting that I had read that one of the books, Invisible Man, had been litigated. I have not been able to independently verify that. I'd like to withdraw that. But again, we're talking about propriety for sexual content in front of minors. We have other literature available. I think we can use it. Thank you.
I am deeply offended by that. That is not sexual content. That is rape of a child. A teacher would have prefaced that section talking about rape as a child. It should be read as a child being raped. And a teacher would have read the entire book to go on and talk about how people who are raped as children have guilt.
Ma'am, I said nothing about anybody reading
It's
it other
not
than
sexual
a rape.
content. It is rape
I
of
read
children.
I read the text as it came into the book, and I read it heartfelt, ma'am. And I also said it was tragic. I did. This is a question of propriety, not in the sense of how it is treated. I am not suggesting that the Supreme Court's litmus test did not apply here. I'm not. I'm not talking about that at all. But that particular text, as I read it, I don't know how you can be offended by it after I read it.
It was an unnecessary insult.
No, it was for the record so people knew exactly what we're referring to. It was perfectly legitimate.
President Berge.
I'll go next.
Mr. Trimmer?